In the stony uplands of the Dakar Mountains, the farmholds are few and far between. Farmers scrape out a living of the cold earth, planting on sheltered slopes facing south, combing the llama for fleece, carding and spinning and weaving the prime wool, selling pelts to the carpet factories. The mountain llama, called Airu, are a small wiry breed. They run wild without shelter and are not fenced in, since they never cross the invisible, immemorial boundaries of the herd territory. Each farmhold is in fact a herd territory. The animals are the true farmholders. Tolerant and aloof, they allow the farmers to comb out their thick fleeces, to assist them in difficult births, and to skin them when they die. The farmers are dependent on the Airu. The Airu are not dependent on the farmers. The question of ownership is moot. At the Donro farmhold, they don't say, "We have 900 Airu." They say the herd has 900. Danro is the farthest farm in Oru village, in the high watershed of the main river. The people are there, in the mountains, chiseled, not very civilized. Like most of the Kyo, they pride themselves on doing things the way they've always been done. But in fact, they are willful, stubborn. They change the rules to suit themselves and then say to people down there, they don't know the rules, don't honor the old ways, the true Kyo ways, the mountain ways. Some years ago, the first Sederatu of Donro was broken by a landslide up the Farron that killed the mourning woman and her husband. The widowed evening couple, who had both married from each other in the farmholds, fell into the habit of mourning and growing old early, letting the daughter of the mourning manage the farm and all of its business. This daughter of mourning, her name is Shahez. At 30, she is a straight-backed, strong, short woman with rough red cheeks, a mountaineer's long stride, and a mountaineer's deep lunge. She could walk down the road to the village center in deep snow with a 60-pack pelt in her back, sell the pelts, pay her taxes, visit a bit of the village hearth, and stride back the street zigzagging home before nightfall. 40 kilometers could go round trip, 600 meters of altitude each way. If she or anyone else in Donro wanted to see a new face, they had to go down the mountain to the other farms in the village center. There was nothing to bring anybody up the herd road to Donro. Shahe seldom hired help, and the family wasn't sociable. Their hospitality, like the road, had grown stony through lack of use. But a traveling scholar from the lowlands, who came up the main all the way to Oro, was not daunted by another near-vertical stretch of ruts and rubble. Having visited the other farms, the scholar climbed on around the Farron, Kedden, and up to Donro, and there made the honorable and traditional offer to share worship at the house shrine, to lead conversation about the discussion, to instruct the children of the farmhold in spiritual matters, for as long as the farmers wished to lodge and keep her. The scholar was an evening woman, over 40, tall and long-limbed, with cropped dark brown hair as fine and curly as a llama's. She was quite fearless, expected nothing in the way of luxury or even comfort, and had no small talk at all. She was not one of the subtle and eloquent expounders of the great center. She was a farm woman who had gone to school. She read and talked about the discussions in a plain way that suited her bearers, sang the offerings and the praise songs to the oldest tunes, and gave brief, undemanding lessons to Donro's one child, a 10-year-old mourning half-nephew. Otherwise, she was as silent as her hosts and just as hard-working. They were up at dawn. She was up before dawn to sit in meditation. She studied her few books and wrote for an hour or two after that. The rest of the day she worked alongside the farm people, whatever job they gave her. It was fleecing season, midsummer, and the people were out all over the place, all over the vast mountain territory of the herd, following the scattered groups, combing the animals where they lay. The old Iru knew and liked the combing. They lay with their legs folded under them, stood still for it, leaning into the comb stone a little, sometimes making a small shivering whispered cough of enjoyment. The yearlings, whose fleece was the finest and brought the best price raw or woven, were ticklish and frisky. They sidled a bit and bolted. Fleecing yearlings called for a profound and resolute patience. To this the young Iru would at least respond, growing quiet and even drowsy, and the long, fine teeth of the comb bit in, stroked through, over and over again, in the rhythm of the comb's soft, monotonous tune. The traveling scholar, whose religious name was Inu, showed such a knack for handling newborn Iru that Shahez took her out to try her hand at fleecing yearlings. Inu proved to be good with them, as with the infants, and soon she and Shahez, the best fine fleecer of Oro, were working daily side by side. After her meditations and readings, Inu would come out and find Shahez on the great slopes, where the yearlings still ran with their dams and newborns. Together the two women could fill a 40-pound sack a day, with the airy silk milk-colored clouds of the combings. Often, they would pick a pair of twins, of which had been an unusual number this mild year. If Shahez led one of the twins, the other would follow it, and Yama twins will do all their lives. And so the women could work side by side in the silent, absorbed companionship. They talked only to the animals. "Move your leg." And Shahez would say the yearling she was combing as it gazed at her with the great, dark, dreaming eyes. And Inu would murmur, or hum, a fragment of an offering, to soothe her beast when it shook its disdainful, elegant head, showed its teeth at her for tickling its belly. Then for half an hour, nothing but the crisp whisper of the combs, the flutter of the unceasing wind over stones, the soft bleat of a calf, the faint rhythmic sound of the nearby beast biting in the thin dry grass. Always one old female stood watch, the alert head poised in the long neck, the large eyes watching up and down the vast tilted plains of the mountains from the river miles below to the hanging glaciers miles above. Far peaks of stone and snow stood distinct against the dark blue sun-filled sky, blurred off into clouds and blowing mists that shone out again across the gulfs of air. Inu took a big clod of milky fleece, had it combed, and Shahez held open the long, loose, woven doubled-in sack. Inu stuffed the fleece down into the sack, and Shahez took her hand. Inu, when she was a rough farm girl named Akal, had the misfortune to attract and be attracted by a man whose pleasure was in cruelty. When she finally understood what she did not have to endure, what he did to her, she ran away, not knowing how else to escape him. She took a refuge at the school of Asta, and there found the work and learning much to her liking, as she did the spiritual discipline, and later the wandering life. She had been an iterant scholar with no family, no close attachments for 20 years. Now Shahez's passion opened her a spirituality, a revelation that transformed the world and made her feel as if she never had lived in it before. As for Shahez, marriage was an urgent matter of business. She was 30 years old. Danaro had no whole Siderantu, no childbearing women, only one child. Her duty was plain. She had gone courting in grim, reluctant fashion to a couple of neighboring farms where there were evening men. She was too late for the man of the Biha farm, who ran off with a lowlander. The widower of Upper Kayed was receptive, but he also was nearly 60 and smelled like urine. She tried to force herself to accept the advance of Uncle Mika's half-cousin from Oak Grove Farms down the hill, but his desire to own a share of Donero was clearly the sole substance of his desire for Shahez, and he was even lazier and more shiftless than Uncle Micah. Since they were girls, Shawhace had met now and then with Timley, the evening daughter of the nearest farmhold, Kedden, round on the other side of the farm. Timley and Shawhace had a special friendship that was true and reliable, a pleasure to both of them, and they both wished it could be permanent. Every now and then they talked, lying in Shawhace's bed at Donrow or Timley's bed at Kedden, getting married, making a Sodaratu. It was no use going to the village matchmakers. They knew everybody the matchmakers knew, and one by one they would name the men of Oro, and the very few men they knew from outside the Oro Valley, and one by one they would dismiss them as either impossible or inaccessible. The only names that always stayed on the list was Otora, a mourning man who worked at the carding sheds down the village center. Shawhace liked his reputation as a steady worker. Timley liked his looks and conversation. He evidently liked Timley's looks and conversation too, and would certainly have come courting her if there were any chance of a marriage at Kedden. But it was a poor farmhold. There was the same problem there as Donrow. There wasn't any eligible evening man. To make a Sodaratu, Shawhace and Timley and Otora would have to marry the shiftless, shameless fellow at Okba, or the sour widower of Kayed. To Shawhace, the idea of sharing her farm and her bed with either of them was intolerable. Shawhace sighed. Every autumn she trekked down 60 kilometers to Manibo Fair with a train-packed llama laden with pelts and wool, and looked for a man. But those she looked at twice never looked at her once. And even though Donrow offered a steady living, nobody wanted to live way up there, on the roof, as they called it. And Shawhace had no prettiness or nice ways to interest a man. Hard work, hard weather, the habit of command made her tough. Solitude made her shy. She was like a wild animal among the jovial, easy-talking dealers and buyers. And last autumn, once more, she had gone to the fair, and once more strode back to the mountains, sour and dour. Inno woke in the ringing silence of the morning night. She saw the small square of the window ablaze with stars, and felt Shawhace's warm body beside her. Inno, or a call, as she had asked Shawhace, to call her when they were alone, going back to the girl name she had given up. A call knew only too well what Shawhace meant. It was the farmholder's duty to provide a continuity. As Shawhace owed her life to her ancestors, she owed life to her descendants, and a call did not question this. She had grown up on a farmhold, and since then at school she had learned about the joys and duties of the soul, and with Shawhace they had learned the joys and duties of love. And neither of them in any way invalidated the duty of a farmhold, and Shawhace need not bear children herself, but she must teach Suet that Donrow had children. And if Timley and Otora made the evening marriage, Timley would bear the children of Donrow. But a Sodaratu must have a morning marriage. Shawhace must find an evening man, and Shawhace was not free to keep a call at Donrow, nor was a call justified in staying there. For she was, in a way, an irrelevance, ultimately an obstacle, a spoiler. As long as she stayed on, she was neglecting her religious obligations, while compromising Shawhace's obligation to her farmhold. Shawhace had said the truth. She had to go. She got out of bed and went over to the window. Cold as it was, she stood there, naked in the starlight, gazing at the stars that flared and dazzled from the far gray slopes up to the zenith. She had to go, and she could not go. She had found life, and she could not go down to death. She could not go, but she had to go. Shawhace said across the dark room, "Marry me." And a call came back to the bed, her bare feet silent on the bare floor. She slipped on the bed fleece, shivering, feeling Shawhace's warmth against her, turning to her to hold her, but Shawhace took her hand in a strong grip. "Marry me." And and after a moment, Akal sighed and stretched out, her hands behind her. "There's no evening men here. You said so yourself. So how can we marry? What can we do? Go fishing for a husband down in the lowlands, I suppose? With the farmhold as bait? What kind of man would that turn up? Nobody. I'd let share you with me for a moment. I won't do it." 2 evening women and 1 sitaratu. Now there's a fine notion. "Listen," Shahe said, still not listening. She sat up with the bed fleece round her shoulders and spoke low and quick. "Listen, you go away. Back down there, the winter goes by. And late in spring, people come up in the mine, looking for summer work. A man comes to Otoro, says, 'Is anybody good for fleecing?' And as the sheds, they tell him yes. Shahe's from Donro, down here, is looking for a good hand. So he comes up here, and he knocks on the door, and he says, 'My name is Akal. I hear you need a fleecer.' 'Yes,' I say, 'yes I do, come in. Oh, come in. Come in and stay forever.'" Her hand was like iron on Akal's wrist. Her voice shook with exultation. Akal listened as a fairy tale. "Who's to know? Who'd ever know you? You're taller than most men up here. You can grow your hair, dress like a man. You said you liked men's clothes once. Nobody will know. Whoever comes here anyway." "Oh, come on, Shais. The people here. Maj Madu Shest. The people won't see anything. McCall's a half-wit. The child won't know. And Timley can bring old Barnes from Kedden to marry us. He never knew a tit from a toe anyway. He can say the marriage ceremony. And Timley? Don't worry about Timley. She'd do anything to get out of Kedden. She wants to come here. And I've wanted to marry for years. Now we can. All we need is a mourning man for her. She likes Otora well enough. And he'd like the share of Donro. Nicole stared through the dark Shahe, speechless. Finally, she said, "What you're proposing is that I go away now, come back after, marry you and Timley and a man I never met, and live here for the rest of my life pretending to be a man. And nobody is going to guess who I am or see through it as an object? Least of all my husband, I suppose. He doesn't matter." They rolled back and forth together, laughing and crying with the fleece around them, stars blazing at them. "I'll do it. I'll do it." Gossips in Oro had begun to ask if that scholar woman was going to spend the winter up in the high farmholds, where she was now, Donro, or was it Kedden? And she came walking down the zigzag road. She spent the night and sang the offerings for the mayor's family and caught the daily freighters to the Sun train station down at Dermain. The first of the autumn blizzards followed her down the peaks. Sahes and Akal sent no message to each other all through the winter. In the early spring, Akal telephoned the farm. "When are you coming?" "In time for fleecing." For Shahes, the winter passed in a long dream of Akal. Her voice sounded in the empty next room. Her tall body moved behind Shahe's through the weird snow. And Shahe's sleep was peaceful, rocked in certainty of love and love to come. For Akal, or Ino, as she became again in the lowlands, the winter passed in long misery of guilt and indecision. Marriage is a sacrament. And surely what they planned was a mockery of that sacrament. Yet assuredly, it was a marriage of love. And as Shahes had said, it harmed no one, unless it deceived them was to harm them. It cannot be right to fool the man Otora into a marriage where his night partner could turn out to be a woman. But surely no Pan, knowing the schemes beforehand, would agree to it. Deception was the only means at hand. They must cheat him. The religion of the Kyo lack priests and pundits who tell the common folk what to do. The common folk have to make up their own moral and spiritual choices, which is why they spend a good deal of time discussing the discussions. A scholar of the discussions, Enno, knew more questions than most people, with fewer answers. She sat, all the dark winter mornings wrestling with her soul. She called Shahez, who was to tell her that she could not come. When she heard Shahez's voice, her misery and guilt ceased to exist. Her gone, a dream, gone on walking. And in the spring, when she worked with the crew rebuilding and repainting a wing of her old school at Asta, she let her hair grow. When it was long enough, she clubbed it back. The men often did. And in the summer, having saved a little money working for the school, she bought men's clothes, put them on, and looked at herself in the mirror in the shop. She saw a Call. Call was a tall, thin man with a thin face, a bony nose, and a slow, brilliant smile. A Call got off the high-desk freighter at its last stop. Oro went to the village center and asked if anybody was looking for a fleecer. Donro. The farmer was down from Donro twice already. Anybody here with a fleecer? Coarse fleecer, wasn't it? Coarse fleecer. Anyone here a coarse fleecer? Took a while, but the elders and gossips agreed at last. A fine fleecer was wanted at Donro. Where's Donro? Up. You ever handled Iru yearlings? Yes. Oh. Up west or up east? They told him the road to Donor, and he went off in zigzags, whistling a familiar praise song. And as the call went on, he stopped whistling, stopped being a man, and wondered how she could pretend not to know anybody in the household, how she could imagine they would know her. How could she deceive Shest, the child whom she taught the water rise and praise songs? A pang of fear and dismay and shame shook her when she saw Shest coming running to the gate to let the stranger in. Akal spoke little, keeping her voice down in her chest, not meeting the child's eye. She was sure he recognized her, but his stare was simply that of a child who saw strangers so seldom that for all he knew they all looked alike. He ran in to fetch the old people, Mogul and Madhu. They came out to offer Akal the customary hospitality, a religious duty, and Akal accepted, feeling mean and low at deceiving these people who had always been kind to her in their rusty, stingy way. She was sitting in the kitchen, drinking a thin, sour soup of summer greens, when Shahez came in, grim, stocky, weather-beaten, wet. Summer thunderstorm broken over the Farron soon after a call reached the farm. "Who is that?" said Shahez, doffing her wet coat. "Came from the village. He said you wanted a hand with the yearlings." Akal had no life history, at least not a recent one. Akal nodded dumb. Was it possible Shahez did not recognize her? Her voice was flat, unfriendly. The one glance she had given Akal was dismissive. She sat down with her soup bowl and began eating hungrily. After a month or so, Shahez and Akal weren't hiding the fact that they slept together. Shahez began to talk about making a Sadaratu. An old couple grudgingly approved. They had no other kind of approval to give. Maybe Akal was ignorant, didn't know a hassle bit from a cold chisel. They were all like that down there. Remember the traveling scholar, Inu? He stayed here last year. He was just the same, too tall for her own good and ignorant, but willing to learn. Same as Akal. Akal was a prime hand with the beasts, or had the makings of it anyhow. Shahez could look farther and do worse, and it meant she and Timley could be the day marriage of the Siddharatu. and they would have been given long since they had any kind of men around worth taking from the farmhold. What's wrong with this generation? There were plenty of good men around today. Shahis had spoken to village matchmakers down in Oro. They spoke to Ursula, now a foreman of the carding sheds. He accepted a formal invitation to Donro. Such invitations included meals and an overnight stay, necessarily in such a remote place, but the invitation was to share worship with the farm family at their house shrine, and its significance was known to all. So they all gathered at the house shrine, which at Donro was a low, cold inner room, walled with stone, with a floor of earth and stones, the unleveled ground of the mountainside. A tiny spring rising at the higher end of the room trickled in a channel of cut granite. It was the reason why the house stood where it did, and had stood there for 600 years. They offered water and accepted water, one to another, one to another. The old evening couple, Uncle Mika, his sons Shest and Asby, who had worked as a pack trainer and handyman at Donro for 30 years. A call, the new hand, Shahis, the farmholder, and the guests. Ursula from Oro, and Timley from Kedden. Timley smiled across the spring at Ursula. He did not meet her eyes, or anyone else's. Timley was a short, stocky woman, the same type as Shahis, but fair-skinned, a bit lighter all around, not as solid, not as hard. She had a surprising clear singing voice that soared up in the praise songs, and Ursula was always rather short and broad-shouldered, with good features, a competent-looking man, but just now extremely ill at ease. He looked as if he robbed a shrine or murdered the mayor. Studying him from interest, he might have. He looked furtive. He looked guilty. And Nicole observed him with curiosity and dispassion. She would share water with Ursula, but not guilt. Once or twice she did ask herself, what if I had been born in the morning instead of the evening? A perverse and terrible thought. But perversity and sacrilege were not asked of her. All she had to do was change sex, and that in only appearance in public. With Shahe, she was a woman, more truly a woman in herself than she'd ever been in her life. With everybody else, she was a call, whom they took as a man. There was no trouble at all. She was a call. She liked being a call. It was not like acting a part. She never had been herself with all the other people. Had always felt a falsity in their relationships with them. She had never known who she was at all, except sometimes for a moment of meditation. For here I am became it is, she breathed. So it was that she had agreed with Shahes. They should say nothing to Ursula, nothing even to Timley. Let's see what Timley makes of you, Shahes said, and Akal agreed. Last year, Timley had entertained the scholar Inno overnight at her farmhold for instructions and worship, and met her 2 or 3 times at Donro. When she came to share worship again today, she met Akal for the first time. But did she see Inno? She gave no sign of it. She greeted Akal with a kind of brusque goodwill and talked about breeding Aru. She quite evidently studied the newcomer, judging, sizing up. But that was natural enough. As for Toro, Shahes and Akal colluded to deceive him without ever saying a word. Akal's mind shied away from the subject. They would get to know each other during the engagement period, she thought. She would have to tell him eventually. She did not want to have sex with him, of course. And the only way to do that was to say that Akal, was averse to having sex with other men, hoped he would forgive her. But Shahes had made it clear that she wasn't telling him that before they were married. If he knew it beforehand, he would refuse to enter the Sadaratu. And even worse, he might talk about it, expose Akal as a woman, in revenge. Then they could never be able to marry. And when Shahes had spoken about this, Akal had felt a distressed and trapped, anxious, guilty feeling again. But Shahes was serenely confident and untroubled. And somehow Akal's guilty feeling would not stick. and they dropped off. She simply hadn't thought much about it. She watched Utora, now with the sympathy and curiosity, wondering what made her look so hangdog. He was scared of something, she thought. And after the water was poured and the blessing said, Shahais read from the fourth discussion. She closed the old box book very carefully, put it on its shelf and cloth over it, then speaking to Mogul and Madhu as those proper, they being what was left of the first Sadaratu of Downrow, she said, My old mother and old father, I propose that a new Sadaratu be made in this house. If all be willing, the marriage of the morning will be Shahais and Akal. The marriage of the evening will be Timli and Otora. And the marriage of the day will be Shahais and Timli. And the marriage of the night will be Akal and Otora. There was a long pause. Magel hunched his shoulders. Madhu said at last, rather fretfully, Well, is that all right with everybody? And they all said yes. A pause. Everyone except Otora, of course. He had blushed purple, and as they watched, turned grayish. I'm willing, he said at last in a forced mumble and cleared his throat. Okay. Nobody said anything. Finally, a call said, We don't have to decide now, we can talk. Come back to the shrine later. Yes, Otora said, glancing at a call with a look in which so much emotion was compressed that she could not read it at all. Terror, hate, gratitude, despair. She was touched and grieved by his humility. Was it men's boastfulness with other men, or the hardness of the mountain people that had burdened him with this ignorance, this shame? She had withdrawn her comforting, patronizing arm from his shoulder. She learned his hands on the top bar of the gate. She looked at her hands, long and strong, hardened and dirt-ingrained from the farm work to the oil of the fleeces kept in the supple. A farmer's hands. She had given up the religious life for love's sake and never looked back. But now, she looked at her hands. She wanted to tell this honest man the truth, but it would do no good, unless not to make the Sadaratu was the only good. I think what matters if we try to give each other what we want, and that's how we're married. I wish there was somebody to ask, like that traveling scholar that was here last summer. Somebody who knows about religion. I guess the thing is to just try your best. It sounded sensuous. He added plainly, I guess I can do that. A mountain farmhouse like Donro is a dark, damp, bare, grim place to live in. Sparsely furnished with no luxuries except for the warmth of the big kitchen and the splendid bled fleeces. But it offers privacy, which may be the greatest luxury of all, though Kyo considers it a necessity. At Donro, everyone had their own room and bathroom. The two old members of the first Sadaratu and Uncle Mika and his child had rooms in the center of the west wing. Osby, when he wasn't sleeping out in the mountain, had a cozy, dirty nest behind the kitchen. The second Sadaratu had the whole east side of the house. Timli chose a little attic room, half flight of stairs from the others with a fine view. Shais kept her room, Akal hers, adjoining, and Otora chose the southeast corner, the sunniest room in that house. The conduct of the new Sadaratu is to some extent and wisely prescribed by custom and sanctioned by religion. The first night after the ceremony of marriage belongs to the morning and evening couples, the second night to the day and night couples. Thereafter the four spouses may join as when they please, but always and only by invitation given and accepted, and the arrangements are to be known to all four. Four souls and bodies all the year of all four lives to come are in the balance in each other, and those decisions and invitations, passion, negative and positive, must find its channels, and trust must be established, lest the whole structure fail to be found in solidity, or destroy itself in selfishness and jealousy and grief. Akal knew all the customs and sanctions. She insisted that they follow to the letter. Her wedding night with Shahez was tender and a little tense. Her wedding night with Otora was also tender. They sat in his room and talked, shy with each other, grateful. Within a few weeks, Akal knew that Shahez was more intent on having her way, on having Akal as her partner, than on maintaining any kind of sexual balance or even pretense of it. As far as Shahez was concerned, Otora and Timley could look after each other, and that was that. Akal had, of course, known many Sadaratu, where one or two of the partnerships dominated the others completely, through passion or the power of ego. To balance all four relationships was perfectly an ideal, seldom realized. But this Sadaratu, already built on deception, a disguise, was more fragile than most. But Shahez wanted what she wanted, consequences be damned. And Akal had followed her far by the mountain, not follow her from the precipice. She was with Timley in the old dye room, unused for years until Timley, an expert dyer, came to the farm. Weavers down in the center would pay well for fleece dyed the true Decca red. Her skill had been Timley's dowry, and Akal was her assistant and apprentice now. Timley nodded. 18 minutes, timer set. Checked the vents on the great dye boiler. Checked the readout again and went outside to catch the morning sun. Akal joined her on the stone bench of the stone doorway. The smell of the vegetable dye, pungent, acid sweat, clung to them. Clothes and hands and arms rattled pink and crimson. Akal had become attached to Timley very soon, finding her reliably good-tempered and unexpectedly thoughtful, both qualities that had been in rather short supply at Donro. Without knowing it, Akal had formed her expectations of the mountain people on Shahez. Powerful, willful, undeviating, rough. Timley was strong and quite self-contained, but open to impressions as Shahez was not. Relationships within her moiety meant little to Shahez. She called to Otora brother because it was customary, but did not see a brother in him. Timley called Akal brother and meant it, and Akal, who had no family for so long, welcomed the relationship, returning Timley's warmth. They talked easily together, though Akal had constantly to guard herself from becoming too easy and letting her woman self speak out. Mostly it was no trouble at all being Akal. She gave little thought to it. But sometimes with Timley it was very hard to keep up the pretense, to present herself from saying what a woman would say to her sister. In general, she had found that the main drawback in being a man was that conversations were less interesting. They talked about the next step in the dyeing process, and then Timley said, looking off over the low stone walls of the yard, to the huge purple slant of the Farron, "You know Inu, don't you?" The question seemed innocent. Akal almost answered automatically with some kind of deceit. The scholar was here. But there was no reason why Akal the Fleecer would know Inu the scholar. Timley nodded, smiling a little. She said nothing more. Akal was amazed at her subtlety or restraint. There was no difficulty in honoring so honorable a woman. "I lived alone for a long time. Even on the farm when I grew up, I was mostly alone. I'm glad to have a sister." Their eyes met briefly, a flicker of recognition, a glance planting trust deep and silent as a tree root. They were up on the Farron, looking for an old beast that Asby had reported missing from the herd. The keen autumn wind had blown Shahez's cheeks red. She stood staring at Akal, squinted her watering eyes so that she looked knifeable. The old Yama had broken a leg and had slipped from the rocks. She lay neatly collected, though the broken forelegs would not double under her white breasts, but stuck out forward. Her whole body had a lurch to that side. Her disdainful head was erect on the long neck. She gazed at the woman, watching her death approach, clear, unfathomable, uninterested eyes. "Is she in pain?" Akal asked. "Of course," Shahe said, sitting down several places away from the Yama to sharpen her knife to its emery stone. She took a long time getting the knife as sharp as she could get it, patiently retesting and re-wetting the blade. At last she tested it again and then sat completely still. She stood up quietly, walked over to the Yama, pressed its head up against her breast, and cut its throat in one long, fast slash. Blood leaped out in a brilliant arc. Shahe slowly lowered the head with its gazing eyes down to the ground. Akal found that she was speaking the words of the ceremony for the dead. Now all that was owed is repaid, and all that was owned returned. Now all that was lost is found, and all that was bound free. And Shahe stood silent. Then came the work of skinning. They would leave the carcass to be cleaned by the scavengers in the mountain. It was a carrion bird circling over the Yama that had first caught Akal's eye, and there were now 3 of them riding the wind. Skinning was fussy, dirty work in the stink of meat and blood, and Akal was an expert, clumsy, cutting the hide more than once. In penance, she insisted on carrying the pelt, rolled as the best they could and strapped to their belts. She felt like a grave robber, carrying away the white and dun fleece, leaving the thin, broken corpse sprawled among the rocks in the indignity of its nakedness. Yet in her mind, she has lugged the heavy fleece along with Shahe's, standing up and taking the Yama's beautiful head against her breast, slashing its throat, all in one long movement, in which the woman and the animal were utterly one. It is need that answers need, Akal thought, as it is a question that answers questions. And the pelt reeked of death and dung, and her hands were caked in blood and ached, gripping the stiff belt as she followed Shahe down the steep rocky path homeward. "I'm going down to the village," Atora said, getting up from the breakfast table. He gave a kind of satisfied snarl. He looked handsome in his anger, flushed and reckless. "I've let this go on for too long, just because she owned the farmhold. And managed it since she was 14, Akal cut in. You think she can quit managing just like that? She always runs things here. She had to. She never had anybody to share power with. Everybody has to learn." That's right. Atorov had a flashback. And a marriage isn't 2 pairs. It's 4 pairs. That brought Akal up short. Instinctively, she looked at Timley for help. But Timley was sitting, quiet as usual, her elbows on the table, gathering up crumbs with one hand and pushing them into a little pyramid. "Timley, me, you, Shahe's, evening and morning. What about Timley and her? What about you and me?" She looked up and saw a gleam in his eyes. Triumph, laughter. At this, Timley made a strange noise and put her face in her hands. Akal thought she had burst into tears. Then she saw she was laughing. The painful, helpless, jolting laugh of a person who hasn't had much practice at it. "There's not much to laugh about," Atoro said, and had no more to say. His anger had blown up, leaving nothing but smoke. He groped for words for a while longer. He looked at Timley, who was indeed in tears now, tears of laughter, and he made a despairing gesture. He sat down beside Timley and said, "I suppose it is funny, if you look at it. It's just that I feel like a chump. The biggest chump. And it was what Shahe, standing in the passageway, heard. Their laughter. 3 of them, laughing. She went out to the work shed and stood in the dark behind the door. Tried to cry and didn't know how. She had not cried when her parents were killed. There had been too much to do. She drew her knife, tested its edge. She made it very sharp yesterday on the far end to kill the llama. She came back to the house, to the kitchen. They were all still there. Chest had come back, was pestering Atora to take him into town, and Atora was saying maybe. Timley looked up. Akal looked round at Shahe's. The small head on that graceful neck. The clear eyes gazing. The unsheathed knife. And no one spoke.